this is the story that I'm bringing back to the States for Remnant TV, is the number of journalists who are asking tough questions. This is so important to me. I'm so glad I can. People say, what are you doing there, man? It's a waste of time. That's not a waste of time. We're in the middle of a war here, right? And wars need war correspondents. And I've been sitting in the Vatican press office the last few days just in admiration of the war correspondents that are here. They're on the level of the Father Ralph Whitgens of the Rhine flows into the Tiber during the Second Vatican Council. Guys that came and chronicled and reported what was going on, so the rest of the world would understand there's a revolution happening here. So today, for example, maybe in post we'll put this guy's question because I didn't recognize his name. He asked the question about Fiducia Supplicans.
My question is, when we see bishops' conference, a bishops' conference or several bishops' conferences opt out of embracing a magisterial teaching, so to speak, such as we saw from several bishops' conferences with Fiducia Supplicans, does that set a precedent for fracturing the church's unity, or is that just synodality at work, and is that what we can expect from a synodal church moving forward? Thank you.
And an excellent question. The Cardinal answers the question. And it's just this unbelievable tacit admission of what a lie or a deception this actually is. Because he starts going on about the African Bishops' Conference, for example, conferences not accepting Fiducia Supplicans.
Now, in the case which you bring up in terms of how one or the other bishops' conferences may have decided to approach any document, but in this case, Fiducia Supplicans, the bishops in the Episcopal conferences of Africa were basically saying that here in Africa, our whole cultural reality is very different. So that this document, it wasn't saying rejecting the teaching authority of Rome. It was saying that our cultural situation is such that the application of this document is just not going to work.
So here's what my takeaway was. Holy cow. So this is in the middle of the Synod on Synodality. This is in the middle of the Church of Accompaniment, the listening church, right? That the Holy Father, the Pope of Rome, who's supposed to be the Pope of the Universal Church, comes out with TNT document, Fiducia Supplicans, in which he says, well, gay people need to be blessed, whether it's couples or whatever. It's not unions, it's not marriage. There's people need to be blessed. Okay, we've gone over that so many times. Unheard of in the history of the Catholic Church, right? So here's the thing. Here's my takeaway from today's press conference. Was Francis unaware that there are millions of Catholics in Africa for whom this was not going to go over well? Now, he says he's listening. He says he's out there smelling the sheep. So there's only a couple of takeaways from this. Either he is so inept that he didn't know what the Africans were going to say about blessing gay people, or he doesn't give a flying papal rat's lower extremity, about the resistance that's going to happen throughout the world to some of his revolutionary ideas. He didn't care. We at least have to allow for the possibility. He just doesn't give a rip that the African Bishops' Conference, not just a few idiot people out in the hinterland somewhere, entire conferences of bishops around the world were not going to go for this. So what kind of a synodal church are we talking about here? That the Pope evidently is so inept that he was unaware of it, or so vicious and so not listening to the people that he forced this on them anyway. Because as a result of Pope Francis not taking into account or refusing to take into account or overlooking the African objections, as a result of that, you've got this massive rift in the church now, in the Church of Accompaniment, the church that's all about unity and all about listening and dialogue at little tables, right? Now you have this massive rift where you have literally, I just came from Africa, I talked to the bishops in Africa, millions and millions of people, not only in Africa, but around the world, are looking at the Holy Father and going, huh, so there's this, who are we supposed to believe? The African bishops are following the traditional teachings of the church. So the Pope is saying there's something different. So it's not the people's fault. It's not the millions and millions of people around the world, Catholics around the world, who are looking at this synod and they're saying this is absolutely bafflingly confusing. Who are we supposed to believe? Who's in charge here? So I think that's a huge, huge concern about the Synod on Synodality is, are they failing to take this into account, or are they intentionally deciding to force a revolutionary concept, a moral revolution on the entire church? But that's the only thing I could take away. Yeah, the Africans, they don't get it. Their culture is different. They're still doing terribly intolerant things over there. We got to be patient with them. Well, then why did the Holy Father do it? Why didn't he go to Africa and have a special 2-year pre-synod or pre-Fiducia Supplicans plan of listening to talk to the African bishops' conferences about this thing that he was about to do before he forces this scandal on the entire church? That's a perfectly reasonable conclusion, no matter where you come down on Fiducia Supplicans. Why didn't they get this right beforehand? Why did he force it on people and cause this massive scandal? So that's the takeaway. And so we're getting things from back home, people saying, why are you bothering to show up for this ridiculous event? It's not a ridiculous event. It's not a ridiculous event. This is a revolution on the order as big or bigger than the Second Vatican Council. This is not a ridiculous event. This is going to change. Just today in the press briefing and the press office, we actually heard a canon lawyer who was up there answering questions actually say, this is the reset, the Catholic reset. That's exactly what it is. It's a Catholic reset of the church. Whether the church is going to survive this synod, who knows? But in any case, this is a monumental event that's happening, which is why you have so many journalists now who are not necessarily traditional Catholics, but they're just looking around going, okay, so this is what the church teaches about homosexuality. This is what y'all are saying. How do you ever jive that? How do you reconcile that? And these are very, very important points to bring up, important questions to bring up, and also an important event to have the synod manned by war correspondents who are doing the right thing and bringing people back home a word on what's going on, so they can't sneak it through again. I think that the problem with this revolution in the Catholic Church from the beginning, not enough Catholics got involved. Too many Catholics stayed home and let them sort of just push this and force this onto the church. It's revolution. And I think it's really important and really gratifying this time to see that's not happening, which is why I believe this synod is really struggling. It has a real credibility problem with the press and with people all over the world, thanks in large measure to the good job that the journalists here are doing.